you're very, very welcome here to our September edition of Practice News. As I mentioned earlier, 1st of September, kind of a dull Friday morning here in Belfast. So it really does feel like back to school. And it's another packed show for us this morning. We're going to be going till about 12 o'clock or so. And just to hear some of the headlines and areas we'll be covering. And I'll have a detailed schedule for you as well, timing-wise in this. Of course, we have the old staples, and I know very, very popular, our Irish tax updates with Garrod. That'll be coming in about 10:20. And also then our UK tax recording with our UK tax expert Leon Donovan at about that'll be about 20 to 12 or so. We're delighted, as I mentioned earlier, to be joined by Sinead Donovan, our Institute President since last May. And Sinead is going to talk to us about her small practice story, having trained in small practice and joined Grant Thornton at a time when it was a lot smaller as well. And really to talk to us as well about her presidential priorities. I'm also delighted to be joined this morning by two fellow practitioners, by Sean McGlade of Strabane and County Tyrone, and also Fiona Byrne of James Byrne and Company of Mallow and Cork. And along with Sinead, we're going to talk about really kind of towards the end of the year, where does it stand for practice? Challenges, opportunities, and just really going to talk about just, I suppose, hopefully get some key insights into that and that area. The next thing as well is just our Institute advocacy efforts. Delighted again to be joined by Dee Moran, our professional accountancy lead. We're just going to talk about pressing issues such as the CRO, particularly the PPSN numbers, directors' names. That's an issue that's going to be really telling for the autumn time. And also going to be joined by Stephen Lowry, going to talk about recent Institute childcare initiatives. So looking forward to that. In a few minutes, I'm going to have a very quick couple of technical updates for you around solicitors' accounts regulations, investment business authorisation, which is changing in the Republic of Ireland, and also then the new UK SARS portal. Sustainability reporting, we're going to touch on that very briefly, myself and Dee, at about 11 o'clock, and just some new guidance that's out there. And Cornwall as well, and we're delighted to have our webinar sponsored by AccuVest, and we're going to be joined by Damien Cooper, fellow chartered accountant as well from AccuVest, to just give his 5-minute overview of where the markets stand now at the end of the summertime. So that's all of what we're going to cover. Cornwall, if you can click ahead again. These are most of the people. Listen, most people you're familiar with here, as I say to myself and with Cornwall. I'm delighted to have Dee back again. Stephen Lowry is one new person, first time on Practice News. So Stephen, you're very, very welcome. And Stephen is a public policy manager in our advocacy and voice team based with the Institute since about last November. So Stephen, great to have you there. Cornwall, if you can click ahead, that's the internal team. As I say, delighted to be joined by Sinead Donovan. I'm sure most of you are familiar with Sinead. Sinead has been a partner with Grant Thornton for about 17, 18 years now, and has been with Grant Thornton for about 20 years, but did train in small practice as well. And she has had a very busy, even initial term over the summer months. So great to talk with Sinead about her priorities. Cornwall, if you can click ahead again. As I mentioned, two guest practitioners, Fiona Byrne. Some of you, particularly if you're in Cork and in the south of the country, you might be familiar with Fiona. She's a leading light in the Cork Society from a practice viewpoint. And James Byrne and Company would be a long-established firm, about 50 years now, second-generation practice, both in Mallow and in Blackpool in Cork City. Sean McGlade is a little bit more recent, set up his firm about 5 years ago and is based just on the border in Strabane in County Tyrone. So Sean as well, you might be familiar with from recent Accountancy Ireland articles. And also he has done a very interesting piece there on making tax digital back in the springtime. And actually Sean and myself probably will be having a chat on making tax digital later on in the year as well and where it stands. Cornwall, if you can click ahead again. Delighted, of course, to have Damien from AccuVest, and delighted to have AccuVest as our sponsors for this webinar. And Damien, as I mentioned, will be joining with Cornwall in a few minutes, for a few minutes at about 11 o'clock to give the investment market overview. Cornwall, click again. Look, this is just our overview. I think it's fair to say the webinar has gone from strength to strength. We have attendees this morning from every county on the island of Ireland and from beyond. You can read that yourself. It's always a great insight as to what it is, mostly people in practice. Cornwall, click ahead again. This is the timeline. So if you're time poor or have a quick meeting or a coffee to have, you want to know what's up. As I mentioned, after my technical updates now at about 10:20, we've Garrod on for 20 minutes for Irish tax. Then we're going to have Dee and Stephen given the professional accountancy and public policy news that I mentioned. Damien at 11 o'clock. Headline interview with Sinead at 11:05 for 20 minutes. And that then will also have Sinead joining with Fiona and with Sean for actually what lies ahead for practice piece. That'll run until about 11:45. We're going to have Leoncha's recording on UK tax and our closing comments. So packed show. If we run a few minutes over after 12 o'clock, look, stick with us and hopefully you'll enjoy it. Our disclaimer as ever, and this is particularly important for these webinars, we have a lot of guidance, a lot of materials. We cover some issues at a very, very high level. If there's something that particularly, I'll pick investment business authorization as one I'm going to talk about in a minute that applies to your firm. You're going to have to get behind into the nitty gritty and see how the regulations match into your requirements. We do give you the guidance there to go with as well. So that's the disclaimer there. Conal, click ahead again, and I think we're into the practice updates, and I'm going to keep talking here. And the first one is the Solicitors Accounts Regulations for 2023. If you're based in the Republic of Ireland, a lot of you, I'm sure, would have actually solicitors where you provide assurance engagements and reporting to the Law Society. You'd be familiar that there's new accounts regulations out since last April. And Conal, if you can click ahead again, we have some more guidance and updates we want to give you on that. So the first thing, as I mentioned, the Law Society in April put out the new Solicitors Accounts Regulations. You can actually click through the link there and you get to the regulations. Now, the one key thing here, and I've been getting some questions in over the last couple of months, these regulations came into operation on the 1st of July this year for our accounting periods beginning on or after that date. So the old 2014 regulations, they're still in play for any accounting period that began before the 1st of July 23. So in theory, year-long actual financial reporting times, you could still be using them up to mid-24. So just be aware of that. That's one thing to be aware of. If you click ahead again, Conal, we have some guidance there. Previously, we had a nice article just when they were issued back in April, and that's the first link there. But back about 3 weeks ago, our actual professional accounting team and also the Institute, in cooperation with other accounting bodies through CCABI, issued this technical release, TR0223. And the key thing here is that this aims to put a little bit of guidance out there as to what are the new key changes in the 23 regulations, how you will apply them for your clients that have those years beginning on or after 1 July last. And it goes through just basically background to the regulation, some of the planning thoughts, how to perform the work and the reporting and what's different. It's a quick enough, easy to digest review, so please do download it and familiarise yourself with it if you have solicitors as clients. Also as well, I've been asked when are Practice Consulting going to update their Solicitors Accounts Regulations Toolkit. We'll be looking at that towards the end of the year or definitely by early 2024, because as I mentioned, you will be using the old regulations up until probably April, May at least of 2024. So be aware of that. The current toolkit meets all your requirements in that area. So Conal, that's enough on solicitors. If we click ahead again, investment business regulation in the Republic of Ireland. As I mentioned at the outset, there's been some changes. Now, of course, you're aware that along with audit and insolvency, the Institute would have a designated criteria that it can approve member firms for investment business work in the Republic of Ireland. That's under the Investment Intermediaries Act 1995, delegated by the Central Bank. Now, back in June time, the Central Bank issued new revised conditions and requirements for investment business that will impact on all member firms. And the key changes here will relate to the professional indemnity insurance requirements that you as a firm will have to put in place to meet the new criteria that the Central Bank has laid out. So there's also a couple of changes around capital and monitoring, but I won't dwell on those this morning. So Conal, if you can click ahead again, what are the specific changes to the PI cover? So the first thing here is you'll be aware there's 5 different authorizations for investment business, IA1, IA2, and then IB. That's where most of our actual firms would lie, at the low investment authorizations. The good news is if you're actually not doing any investment business, but are holding IA1, IA2 criteria, but only doing referral only, so basically referring clients for pension and detailed pension advice to a pensions broker or something like that, you still won't need to actually put in place any new requirements. That's a good thing. But if you're actively doing investment business work and actually doing and giving investment business advice, you will actually have to put in place a new higher level of cover, specifically ring-fenced for investment business. These are the actual cover levels there. I won't get into details on them. And if you are going to be renewing your insurance, the new changes will take effect from 1 January next. So you have a bit of a run-in period here. Conal, if you can click to the next slide. All of you who actually are going to be impacted by this and are investment business authorised would have last week received a letter from Professional Standards by email. And this is a very good letter. It goes through what the key changes are. And it also at the back gives appendices as to what you can do under the different levels of investment business authorisation in the Republic of Ireland, the different 5 levels. And I would recommend to anybody to actually now, if they are in an investment business area, to actually go through that letter, match in and see what services they do provide. And just look, have they got the correct investment business authorization? Maybe you mightn't even need investment business authorization anymore. So just to be aware of that. And also as well, if you are going to need this new higher level of cover going forward, the time is to be thinking to talk to your broker and seeing what the costs could be. Now, the good news is we're actually going to talk a little bit more detail about this with Aidan Lamb from Professional Standards in our next edition of Practice News on 6th October. And we're also going to have an insurance broker in to talk about what the costs could be and the ramifications. If you do have any questions in this area in the meantime, you can contact our Professional Standards department. Now, Conal, I know you've been doing a little bit of thinking and talking to people on this as well. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, I mean, I suppose the first thing is that from talking to insurance brokers that the cover is available, which is good to know. Now, obviously, there's going to be a cost to it because the cover has to be ring fenced. So, in effect, it's not another policy, but because it's ring fenced, so obviously there is more cover. Even if you're well covered at the moment in aggregate, this is the ring fencing is the key aspect of it. So you should definitely be aware of what you need and engage with your insurance broker. Make sure that they understand what it is that you need. As with all these things, it always should make people reflect on what level of investment business authorization they actually need. Obviously, in the scope of investment business has narrowed quite considerably in recent years, but it's not going away completely. And it's certainly worth familiarizing yourself with what it is you do and what level of cover, or not even what level of cover, but also what level of authorization you need in order to meet that. And more on. We're going to be talking more about this Practice Matters, the online magazine, and indeed in the next edition of Practice News.
Thanks, Conal. Thanks for those insights. My one final bit of news before we move on to the interview is with relation to, Conal, if you can click the next slide, from a UK point of view, here in the Belfast office here this morning. And I'm sure most of you here who would have a practice based in Northern Ireland, or we may have people who are in practice even in Britain as well joining in here this morning, you'll be aware that there's a new SAR portal on the way from the NCA, the National Crime Agency, and the UK FIU. And so basically, there's been a lot of work, and Conal, if you can click to the next slide, there's been a lot of work done over the last couple of years by the NCA, basically updating the SAR portal. It's quite a big process, as you can imagine, for such a big country as the UK. And of course, the SAR portal is covering banks and other bodies that would have a lot more use for it. The development and testing has been largely completed. And basically, from the 18th of September, the new SAR portal will be open and available to everybody to use. So what we're saying now is if you have been previously signed up to the old SAR portal, you will need to register again if you're a member firm here in Northern Ireland or in the wider United Kingdom for the SAR portal. You will be made aware of it at the time. And if you want to get yourself familiar with the new portal, if you click to the next slide, Conal, there is a couple of helps for you here. First of all, there's a recording of a demo done by the NCA of the new portal, about an hour long, easy to digest, from last April. And also then the NCA just last week have updated their guidance. They have very good how to sign up, FAQ document, overview documents. Again, very easy to digest. So we'd say to you, be getting familiar. And of course, we recommend to firms on both sides of the border to sign up for your relevant actual portal. This is just going to impact those firms based in Northern Ireland, but of course you have a matching Republic of Ireland equivalent by An Garda Síochána and by revenue. So if you're in the Republic of Ireland and haven't signed up to your actual AML online, you should do that as well. So, Conal, that is pretty much that on the NCA portal. I see we might have a couple of questions coming in, and what I'd say to anybody, and I didn't say at the outset, don't be shy as we go through here again, is use the Q&A function. I know tax is always a very popular one where we get questions in, and we'll try to answer if we can as we go. If not, we can try to come back to you as well. So listen, on that note, and Gerard, I know I was talking to you a minute ago, you were saying it's not a bad morning in Cork, and I know you've had a busy summer. You've had budget submissions, you have a lot of ongoing things right throughout the summer and going into September as well. So listen, the floor is yours.
Thanks very much, Jeremy. And yes, it's been a very busy summer actually from the tax point of view. An awful lot of the work, just I suppose to let members know, is being put into the Pillar 2 implementation. Now, again, I mentioned this, at Practice News earlier in the summer, but I guess just to reiterate it and to keep it on our minds, because it is taking up a lot of government resources as well, and it's obviously going to impact what can be done in the upcoming budget. And if you could just move on to the next slide, I'll just, when you get a chance as well, I'll just give you just so you can get a flavor of what we're going to run through today. I've also just kind of, I suppose today I'm conscious as well, not just the budget, but also that we're coming into for tax practitioners and those submitting for tax returns for their clients, the busiest time of the year. The next 3 months, 2.5 months are obviously very, very busy. So I suppose we've also just to mention as well before I get into this that we've done quite a lot of there's been a busy summer of consultations. We fed back on the recent uh, public consultation on the private rental sector. There's these new measures being proposed for outbound payments, and we're currently finalising our response to the Department of Finance funds review. So they're reviewing the entire fund sector. So there's a lot going on in the background there. And what I might do with the next practice news is give you more of an update on those submissions. But as I say, for now, just moving on to the actual points that I've listed down today. The first is this ongoing issue with professional services withholding tax, and Revenue have published a new manual. And once you get your slides today, this the link there will take you to the new manual, and I'd encourage you to read it and to see how this might impact you and your clients. It the suggestion now, or well, not the suggestion. The manual is now stating that from 2024 onwards, if you are in receipt of GMS income, so this is the real issue with PSWT, as anyone working in the area will know, is the general medical services contract between the HSE and GPs. If you are the contracted doctor, whether you're employed or whether you're the practice owner, you are now a chargeable person if you are in receipt of GMS income. So I would encourage you to look at this manual as soon as you can. Particularly the final sections of it contain, I suppose, the key changes. And I suppose just to start considering how this might impact your clients. We've given some thought to perhaps the wider implications of the new changes to the PSWT chargeable rules, but as I say, it is impacting on those with GMS contracts. So I suppose it's white smoke, if you will, but it may result in a change in how certain doctors are taxed. I suppose the doctors that may up to now have been employees. So as I say, encourage you to follow that link and to, I suppose, yeah, just read the guidance. If you have any particular queries on it, as always, you can contact us at the tax@charteredaccountants.ie, and we're happy. We can always take specific queries to Revenue. But as I say, look, this is I suppose the conclusion for now to what has been a long and ongoing issue. The next point here to bring to your attention, again, I would have mentioned it before, but this new enhanced reporting requirement for employers. So since July now, we've been engaging with Revenue via a subgroup of the main TALC. So TALC, just to remind people, is the Tax Administration Liaison Committee. That's the members of the TALC committee are ourselves under the auspices of the CCABI, the Law Society, and the Irish Taxation Institute. So Revenue obviously then host those meetings. So main TALC is I suppose the overall committee that and this enhanced reporting requirement is being, I suppose, discussed at that level. So it is being discussed at the highest level of TALC. At the subgroup so far, we have a submission that we have sent in just to the subgroup for now. We will get a chance to share that again now in the coming weeks via main TALC. The reporting requirement is a significant change. This requirement caught everyone by surprise. We have communicated that via the submissions, via our representations through main TALC. But I suppose as it stands, this is coming in on the 1st of January 2024. what it means is that there are three types of benefits that are now reportable. So this relates to non-taxable payments. So you have the small benefit exemption. This is where you provide two gifts to up to a maximum value of €1,000. You have the remote working daily allowance, which I think is 3 or 20 a day, if I remember, and the travel, the big one being travel and subsistence is reportable. At the moment, the legislation says that you must report to revenue on or before you make the payment. And we've communicated to revenue that this could be, in many cases, with travel and subsistence, that this could actually cause cash flow issues for employees and may indeed be impractical in the sense that often we will submit an expense payment and then it might get paid. And at some point it's not necessarily contemporaneous with payroll, I suppose, is what we're trying to communicate to revenue. But at the moment, it seems to be revenue's approach is to tie this in with payroll reporting. We have been told by revenue that employers across the country have all been contacted. Now, if you are completely unaware of the enhanced reporting requirements and you haven't received any communication, please do email us and let us know that, if you're an employer or if you're working in the finance function of your particular business or company, if you can't find an email, let us know. This is all useful information because revenue are asking us if to what extent are our members aware, and they're asking us just to help with this communication to members. So I suppose we will hopefully, I suppose there is discussion ongoing, as I say, on how this will be implemented. But as I say, for now, it will come in on the 1st of January. I would say we're advising, I suppose, all our members and all businesses to at least start looking at your expense processes around travel and sub in particular. But if you step back and think about the remote working daily allowance, I'd say I'm not aware of many people claiming it, but it won't be a relatively large cohort of people. If you think of the small benefit exemption, I suppose you're only allowed to provide two payments, and I suppose that sort of limits the extent of the reporting of that benefit. Obviously, if you're paying a third payment, that is taxable, so that falls outside the scope of this measure. But travel and sub, obviously, that's going to be a huge, that's going to require a significant administrative effort to report that on the on or before requirement. So later on, I'll get on to tax news, and we'll be encouraging you all to sign up to tax news, where we will keep you updated. But this is a significant change to tax administration for practitioners and advisors and people working, in companies and industry for accountants working across the spectrum. Anecdotally speaking to people, that the awareness is relatively low at the moment. So, the slide there links to the revenues page. There's good information on the page, so I am encouraging you all to just click into the link, get a bit familiar with the requirements and what it's asking, and we will, we are continuing to have discussions at the subgroup level presently. And in 3 weeks, we will be discussing this more at the main TALC committee. So that's the extent of the update I can provide for now. We are aware that this is going to be obviously a significant change for businesses. The discussions, have focused on that. Practitioners, representatives, we have and we continue to communicate the challenge that this represents. So, hopefully we'll have even more to update you at the next practice news. So just moving to the defective concrete product levy, I suppose we're mentioning this because it kicked off today. Today marks the start of the first chargeable period, which runs from the 1st of September 2023 to the end of this year, 31st of December. We're aware that, again, this obviously impacts people in the construction industry mainly, but I suppose just to mention that today is the kickoff. and that this payment now will start becoming due. Again, there's a link there to Revenue's webpage where you will get, I suppose, just a bit more information on it. You'll get the relevant guidance and things like this. But again, if it is pretty industry specific, but just to, I suppose, flag that, yeah, kicking off today. Today marks the commencement of the chargeable period. Just moving to pre-budget, I know when we were talking in June, we were just about to kick off our pre-budget work, and we were certainly we'd had our draft prepared, but it was in review. Since we've published the pre-budget submission, and Sarah Meredith from Grant Thornton, Crona, our tax and public policy lead, and Barry Dempsey, our CEO, met with Minister McGrath a few months ago now. And they presented our pre-budget submission to Minister McGrath. Minister McGrath being obviously a chartered accountant himself, obviously it was great. You find a link there to just a story covering that meeting, and you see him with a copy of the pre-budget submission in his hand. More importantly, I suppose we communicated some of our key messages from the pre-budget submission, I suppose, really centering around housing and, I suppose, measures we'd like to see to maybe, I suppose, move the dial positively for I suppose the issues pretty much across the housing sector, both on the rental side and the retail side. But this is certainly an issue that requires much more than just a tax solution. But I suppose our view in the pre-budget submission is that certainly tax can help short term to just, offset maybe or take some of the heat out of the issues there. The other I suppose key message we're continuing to get across is this concept of a territorial system of taxation. So we would have spoken about this before, and it might sound like something that really is for, you think global, and you might think, but that's only going to impact big businesses. But really what a territorial system will do, in our opinion and in our view, really, I suppose, and the view of our committee, most importantly, is it will make administration it will make a tax administration more straightforward. So if you do, say if you're a company thinking of expanding, but you're thinking, God, that's going to, we'll have to have these complex calculations if we are repatriating overseas profits, or if we have dividends coming back from overseas, and if we branch overseas. A territorial system makes a lot of this far more straightforward, and building as well on I suppose the complex anti-avoidance legislation that has been introduced across the Successive Finance Act. A territorial system lines up, I suppose, it's more congruent, it's more aligned with a lot of these anti-tax avoidance measures that have been introduced. So I'll spare you all the acronyms there because it does get very wordy, and these are complex tax rules. But as we say, that the territorial system of taxation does offset, I suppose, some of the impact of that complexity. I would encourage you all to follow the link, have a read of the pre-budget submission. As always, if you have any thoughts about it, always welcome message on any particular ideas you might have. If you disagree with some of our measures for particular reasons, that's also very helpful, because again, we're trying to represent our very large membership and all your interests, and sometimes what's good in one scenario might not be good in another, and as always, there can always be a blind spot, and your view can always help us to just shine a bit of light on some of those areas. So it's quite a big document this year. They say it's maybe not quite bedtime reading, but it's set out in such a way where you will see the different areas, whether it be housing, entrepreneurship, foreign direct investment, I suppose at the individual personal level. So you can pick the particular section that is maybe of interest to you, and see what you think. So just moving on now. On the final 4 points here, I think I think where pretty much everyone across this call today can get benefit, whether you're in practice or whether you're working in industry, whatever level of business you're working at. The following will be useful in your tax journey, shall we say. So the first, and we have mentioned this again and again, but I think especially at this time of year, the exceptional contact facility is certainly one that I'd like you all to continue to be aware of and keeping at the front of your minds. Obviously, my inquiries can generally speaking, my inquiries work well for people, but when it doesn't work well, it's obviously a significant issue, especially when you're coming close to filing deadlines. You know, particular issues need to be resolved as soon as possible. So revenue have acknowledged that there can be issues, and they always point us toward this exceptional contact facility. So if your communication has gone outside the agreed time frame for a response from my inquiries, you can follow the link here to the exceptional contact facility, and you will find email addresses for your particular tax, whether it's business, personal, etc. And I suppose the feedback has been mostly positive in terms of the response times when you do need to go down the exceptional contact route tends to be satisfactory for people. So again, including that link there as we really get into the business end of the tax season. Again, just to reiterate, the ROS Pay and File extension date 23, so we're getting up to November again, 14th November 23, 15th November 23, and you can follow the link here just to have that in writing. Again, it's always just it's one for me to say, it's always nice just to see the link and to just see it in black and white there. So on the tax source total, just want to mention this again. Obviously, there's many ways to access legislation. You can go onto the Irish statute book. Different practitioner bodies have their different resources. Tax source total is the Institute's complete tax solution set out for complete legislative resource, I suppose is the better way to describe it. And it is updated for Finance Act 2022. It's linked here. It's free for all members to access. I've used this throughout my tax career. I find it very helpful because the revenue guidance, case law, tax and duty manuals are all linked here and very easy to find in the various tabs. But also the different sections of the legislation are hyperlinked, and I find it very useful if you're trying to go back and forth between legislation. And I also like the way the type is set. I find it very useful to read. And the other real benefit with the tax source total resource is it's very easy to switch between different iterations of the legislation, whether it be the Finance Act 22 updates, the Finance Act 21, all the way back to, I think, Finance Act 2000 that goes, or 2003. So there's a significant there's just a significant information there, but I think the historical information is very, very beneficial, especially when you're looking back over tax years, because if you have a particular revenue intervention or whatever, if you're looking at historical stuff with clients, you must look at the legislation as it was at the time. And lastly, just as I'm coming up to my 20 minutes here, I'd encourage you all to go into if you're not already signed up to Chartered Accountants Ireland Tax News, it will recommence after our break for August next Monday. You can sign up in your member profile, and we give extensive news for ROI tax, for Northern Ireland tax, and for international taxation. So there is for UK tax, excuse me, and there's we put a lot of time into it. Leontia, our Northern Ireland tax expert, feeds in on all matters UK, and we've got myself and Gordon McDermott, the other tax manager, are looking after international and Irish. And it's all overseen by Crona, Clause, your tax and public policy lead. So there's quite a lot of resource put into tax news. I like to think we give really useful information. We try and keep it short and sharp, so it should be quick to read, and you should be able to pick out the key information. And I suppose if you're, I think it would be very useful for, even if you're not working directly in tax, it will keep you ahead of what's happening at the moment. And we also throw in a few the few sound bites that'll be useful when you're having those conversations with clients, the water cooler moments. And I know tax is always at the top of people's minds, so it's always good to stay on top. But listen, that's the update for now. I see there's a couple of questions come in, but as always, Jeremy, thanks for the slot here to share what we've been getting up to.
Yeah, well, thank you. As ever, you've given a very, very comprehensive presentation there. Yeah, there's a lot happening. And I know, coming into this very busy autumn period as well. And I know you'll be back in early October, and I'm sure you'll have all the different meetings in September with TELC and different institutes. So there'll be a lot of them updates. It'd be great. Yeah, we appreciate it. As always, it's a popular one with the questions. And so there's, I've keeping an eye. There's a couple of questions there you might be able to answer online, and we might have you back at about 12 o'clock or so. If there's ones that you're seeing teams on there or something, you'd say that's prompted me. I'd like to say that to the actual members as well. And that's a very good point on tax news, issued every Monday. I find it invaluable myself to pull together all the UK and Irish tax news. and just to sign up for tax news, but also in the My Account section on the website, it's easy to forget about these things, but just to sign up for other district society or even practice consulting and practice emails to ensure that you're getting all the emails relevant to you. So that's very, very important too. Listen, Gero, thanks for that. We'll talk to you later on. And as I say to you, that's brilliant. Well, listen, on to our next piece, and I'm delighted to be joined here again. Dee, you are I think I was going to say a regular attendee here on Practice News. And Dee, if you're not familiar, is our professional accountancy leader, and would be very much involved with actually preparing technical alerts, releases, but particularly in your advocacy role dealing with with regulators and bodies like the CRO. And I know you have just some news items as things stand with the CRO. We're coming into a very busy period, and you have a couple, I think I might have stolen your light on the solicitors regulations, but sustainability related releases and documents that have been circulated during the summer as well. So listen, I'm going to hand over to you. Tell us your thoughts on the CRO.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Jeremy. As always, it's great to have the opportunity to give members an update on stuff that has happened over the summer. And good morning to everybody. Hope you had a great summer. Overall, I have to say on technical, it was busy. There were a lot of consultations all summer, which is something that has really only started in the last couple of years. We used to have a kind of a quiet period where we could get other stuff done. And there were a couple of guidances which we wanted to get out prior to September when committees and that start back. So anyway, firstly on the CRO front, and as everybody knows, since the 12th of June, directors have had to provide their PPS number when they're filing certain forms, A1, B1, B10 and B69. We have been engaging with the registrar on this. We know there are a lot of frustrations, and we do understand from them from a technical point of view they haven't had any issues, and they are very aware, and I know I've passed on a number of issues to them where members have been finding that the PPS numbers and details are not matching, and this has been a source of great frustration. So they are we've had the issue as well where when there's one piece of information wrong, that the agent doesn't know which of the directors it's for. Again, they just cite the GDPR requirements, and the most they can do is write to the company director and just tell them that there's a problem. But we will keep pushing on this issue because, as I say, I do know it is causing a lot of problems. Since the go-live date in June, they have removed the requirement for a PPSN for a director that has resigned. So I think that is really useful. I know that was causing some issues also. They are also introducing a system where a director has passed away and the company doesn't have access to their PPSN. Up until now, if a director had died but the company had filed the B10 to resign, you needed a PPS. But they are finalising a process whereby the company can make a declaration in respect of the circumstances, and there will be a workaround on that. So we'll certainly keep you updated as that happens. They are also looking at a solution whereby if a company director has left the company but was in place at the annual return date, and for whatever reason the company either can't get their PPSN or they are refusing to give it, they are examining options in those cases also. One thing just to mention, the CRO are finding that not everybody is completing the field on the form that looks for the name registered with the DSP if that isn't the same. And this has been a new field. And, according to the CRO, this is a very useful field. As you know, there has to be an 80% match on the name. But they're saying, for example, if you were Tony Ward on one form on the company site, but on the social protection, you will say John Anthony Ward, and then if both name fields are completed and there's no match with Tony, then the system would look at John Anthony and find that match. So I think they are saying that they're really encouraging people to fill in this field if there is a difference in names. And it should also be used if a director uses an Irish version of his or her name, or in the case of maiden names. So again, I really would encourage everybody to use that. So I guess with peak filing approaching, what to do, again, I think we've been encouraging to just try and get that information in advance, and just try and get the information verified through the companies, because I think you certainly don't want issues at the peak filing period. We do have another meeting later in September with the CRO Stakeholder Forum, so I will certainly be bringing any issues to it, so please let me know if there are any issues. So next piece then, and next slide, Conal, please, is just on enforcement letters from the CRO. You'll know that many of these issued, so the CRO have indicated that the enforcement have recommenced, and letters were sent, I think, at the end of July. And these, I think, are focused on the companies with the most annual returns outstanding, and companies were given 10 weeks from the date of the letter to bring the filing obligations up to date. So in order to avoid being prosecuted or being struck off, a company will need to file all outstanding returns, and in a lot of cases, I think, audited financial statements and pay the late final penalty. So the letter does set out the consequences of the enforcement proceedings, which, as you know, are quite hefty, including up to 5k penalty for each offence. Just to finish off on the CRO, I guess, and as you're aware, we responded to the Department of Enterprise, Trade and Employment consultation on amendments to the Companies Act 2014 back in June, I think it was. That did include changes on the loss of audit exemption for late filing, which we obviously would very much welcome. We are engaging with the department on that, and we await an update on them. So we have no update on timing yet, but we will certainly let you know when we do. So, just on our publications then, so Jeremy already gave you good insight into the Solicitors Regs, which is our CCABI technical release. Really good working party on that. It was great to have, I think, so many practitioners on it. This link to the Law Society website, I think, gives a good summary of the differences between the old and new regs. And certainly, I'd keep an eye on the Law Society. I think they will have other good information, particularly as we come up to 1 January when a lot of practices will have to commence accounts. So, as you know, it is from 1 Jan 23, but I think for most people, like, the next accounting period will be 1 Jan 24. We also produced a questions and answers, a technical alert on the CSRD, and hopefully members might find this useful. I think this gives just a little bit of detail about who the CSRD will apply to, when it will apply, where the sustainability information should be on the report, and it explains or tries to explain the double materiality concept. There's also a section on who will be entitled to assure sustainability information, which might be interesting for members. And if you haven't yet engaged with the CSRD, I would definitely encourage you to have a read. Just other updates on the CSRD, I suppose we are awaiting the transposition into Irish law. We are expecting it by the end of the year. I think the Department of Enterprise, Trade and Employment are very keen that they would have it in before 1 January when it applies to the very largest of companies. And we have been engaging extensively with them on the matters that there are options over. So again, as we know more about that, we will let you know. And just also to say that the European Commission adopted the European Sustainability Reporting Standards on 31st of July. And this really, I think, marks a significant milestone for the ESRSs. and they will enter into force following the publication in the official journal. And will be there again for those companies commencing on or after 1 Jan 24. So I suppose in summary, I would just say, keep an eye on the website. There will be further webinars on sustainability reporting in the next few months. We have assembled a working party who are meeting at the moment to respond to the IAASB exposure draft on the new ISSA 5000, the draft sustainability assurance standard, which feedback is due by 30th of November. But as always, keep an eye on the Technical Hub and Technical News for any updates. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That was a very comprehensive update as ever there. I know you'll be joining us again in our upcoming webinars in October, maybe a little bit more on CSRD. There'll be a clearer picture. And I know the CRO and the PPSNs, I put it bluntly, that'll be the gift that'll keep on giving. So I'm sure there'll be more thoughts on that as well, as I say to you. I know we've had one or two questions coming in there and different things. I know that when you see general teams emerging, and that's why you welcome members contacting you, when you see general teams emerging, maybe not specific queries, you would, in your interactions with the CRO, take that forward and so on as well, and particularly at file-in time. So that's something that if members are there as well. I know you have to skip off now because you have an international meeting there very soon. But thank you for joining us this morning. I know you'll be back again in October with us again, and it's great to get that update.
Great. Thank you, Jeremy.
Well, listen, our second representative this morning from our Advocacy and Voice team is Stephen Lowry. And Stephen, as I mentioned, is the Public Policy Manager, joined the Institute just about coming on a year ago now, Stephen. I think it's November 22, is that right?
Yeah, that was the big day that I landed on your desk.
Indeed, and I know I've had a sneak preview of actually this presentation out an internal meeting there just earlier this week, and I know as well you've been involved in a couple of I suppose big initiatives over the summertime, and I know it's your first time as well on Practice News, so you're very, very welcome, and I'm sure you'll be a new face to a lot of the people here on the show today. I know you have a few minutes to tell us about the childcare support initiative and the work across the island on that, and also the critical skills listing. So the floor is yours.
Thanks a million, Jeremy. Yeah, as you say, this is my first Practice News meeting, so delighted to be here. It's been very interesting so far. I'm looking forward to the rest. For my part, I'm just here to give a quick update to you on some of the policy areas that we've been lobbying on recently on behalf of members, some really important issues that we've gotten a lot of traction, a lot of feedback from members on. And I hope you find quite useful and interesting. So the first of these is to do with the issue of childcare. Childcare is, needless to say, a hugely important issue to a broad cross-section of our membership. And that was borne out recently by a survey carried out by Chartered Accountants Worldwide, wherein it was found that childcare responsibilities, managing childcare responsibilities, and all the associated difficulties that go with it is increasingly impacting members' career progression. And although this isn't a gender-specific issue, the data does bear out that it has more negatively affected female members' career progression. And obviously, as an institute whose membership is essentially half female, this is something we take very, very seriously, and something we want to take action on. So what have we done? Over the past couple of weeks and months, we've held a number of focus groups with members across the country in both the Republic of Ireland and the North, wherein we invited members who have experiences as working parents of interacting with childcare supports and childcare facilities, and to share their experiences of how they have found that, how it has impacted their career, and I suppose most importantly, what they feel needs to be done to improve the overall childcare landscape and make it easier to be a working parent in the profession today. So although the childcare schemes in the North and in the South are, they're wildly different in terms of what's on offer there, I think some common themes did come out of these forums on both sides of the border, which I can share with you now. And the top of the list, the very, very, the most common repeated issue that parents felt wanted to raise was the issue of capacity. Parents simply cannot find a place for their children in a childcare facility easy enough. It's very, very difficult. Parents are having to commute long distances to get to the nearest available space. They're having to put deposits down just to get on a waiting list, just to see if they can get a place in somewhere nearby. So it's a real, real problem. The infrastructure is lagging behind the supports. There was a real sense from members that they want government to although they appreciate the childcare supports that they're getting in terms of subsidies from the National Childcare Scheme, they would like to see government reorient its focus towards improving the infrastructure and the number of places out there for parents. So that's something that we're going to be feeding back in. And secondly, and it'll come as no surprise to anyone, is cost. Cost is a problem on both sides of the border. Spiraling costs of childcare, are really, really impacting members. And I can't tell you how many times I was told it feels like a second mortgage to many members. And it's something that, although the subsidies are there in the current inflationary environment, is really, it's getting worse. And so something needs to be done to address this. And lastly, and probably a more nuanced point, is the idea of communications from the government and from the state around what supports are people entitled to, letting people know what they're entitled to, how can they access those supports, what they need to do to access those supports, and also communicating the same thing to childcare providers themselves, because they too need to be cognizant of what needs to be done so that parents can actually access the supports, because it requires input from both sides. So more needs to be done in that area as well. So what's the next steps? The next steps from an institute point of view is we're collating all of this feedback, we're putting it into a position paper, and this position paper will ultimately be used to lobby government on both sides of the border for improvements in these areas. And there will be nuanced arguments in the north as opposed to the south, because it is a different situation. But work in this area has already begun. I'm pleased to say in the next couple of weeks, we'll be meeting with the US Special Envoy to the North, Joe Kennedy, specifically on the issue of childcare. So that's a big step forward on the northern side. And looking what he wants to know, what businesses feel needs to be done to ultimately improve the childcare landscape for workers in the economy today. And in the south, this week I met with Minister Michael McGrath and Dara Calleary to talk about a range of different issues, one of which was childcare. A number of other business organisations were also there, and I was heartened to see that they too also raised the idea that childcare is up there with housing and all the other infrastructural assets that need to be addressed if we're to have a functioning economy today. So it's really come into the forefront of prominence, and it's great to see. And to close off on the childcare piece, I would just say to anyone on this call who may be affected or have a kind of experience they'd like to share about their experience with childcare, or would like to get involved in the campaign or like to know more, please do reach out to me directly. Stephen.larry@charteredaccounts.ie. I'd be more than happy to hear your voice on that and feed it in to the overall campaign. Now, without any further delay, I'll just swiftly move on to the second piece that I wanted to talk about, which is another policy issue that everyone will be aware of on this call, and that's capacity. Capacity in the market today, the tight labour market that firms of all sizes are encountering. We have too many vacancies and too few people to fill them. And one way that we're seeking to address that is through the Critical Skills Occupations List. And for anyone who may not know, the Critical Skills Occupations List is a list maintained by government of professions that are currently undergoing significant capacity shortages across the economy. Now, at present, chartered accountants and accountants are listed on the Critical Skills Occupations List, but you can be taken off. And so it's important for a profession like ours to constantly re-emphasize the government that these issues are ongoing, that we are continuing to have capacity issues across the whole spectrum of the industry, and to re-emphasize the need to maintain ourselves on this list. And why? Because it makes it easier for employers to get talent from non-EEA jurisdictions. So if you have a vacancy and you can't fill it in the domestic market and you can't fill it in the wider EEA market, then you can look to non-EEA jurisdictions, which is increasingly the case, not just in the bigger firms, but in the smaller and medium-sized practices as well. An increasing amount of non-EEA talent is being brought in to fill these capacity shortages that we currently have. So it's vital that we stay on this list. And obviously the capacity issues that we're undergoing at the moment, they're going to be exacerbated with more and more regulations coming down the line. As Dee has touched on there, CSRD and all of the associated work that will go with that will require more accountants. In addition, Ireland is pitching to host the European Anti-Money Laundering Authority, a new body of the European Union. And ultimately, what will that require? No prizes for guessing, more accountants. So we're really on the cusp of a crisis here in terms of capacity shortages in the industry. We're doing everything we can to improve the attractiveness of the profession to a younger generation through Leaving Cert reform campaigns and our general comms campaign around improving the general image of the profession for younger entrants. But this too, in the short to medium term, maintaining ourselves on the Critical Skills Occupations List is equally as important to addressing these capacity issues and making it easier for employers to find the necessary talent to fill that gap. So those two are just a real high-level snapshot of some of the policy work that we're doing at the moment. As I say, and as I said earlier, if you have any feedback that you'd like to share with the policy team on either of these areas or the wider advocacy agenda that we're undertaking, please do reach out. It's stephen.lowry@charteredaccountants.ie. But I will be brief and end it there. It's been a pleasure to be
Stephen,
here today.
Thank you very, very much. I gave you a tough job, 7-8 minutes to cover two very detailed areas. You did very, very well there. And I know as well that in our October webinar, we're going to have yourself and Crona back again. You mentioned about the childcare initiative. There's going to be meetings going on in September, North and South. There's going to be obviously formal recommendations coming from this, and you're obviously going to talk to key power makers and brokers on this as well, as I say to you. So looking forward to that. And also we're going to be joined by a practitioner, Maria McHugh, who has set up in practice in Waterford. You may have read her article in Accountancy Ireland and how she set up in practice to help fit into her family life and work-life balance. And that's all childcare, obviously key to that as well. So I'm looking forward to having you back again in October. Stephen, thank you very, very much for that, and have a good day. There might even be a couple of questions, so take a look at the Q&A there as well. Yep. And if you can answer them, as I say to you, great. Well, listen, onwards we go. And Cornel, I know that we're delighted to have Damien Cooper from our sponsors AccuVest again. Hopefully Damien is here with us as well. And I know you have a few minutes to cover what you're seeing now as we enter the autumn and the investment market. Absolutely, Damien. It's great to have you. We can't actually see you or hear you just right now, but I'm sure we will in 1 second. This is getting worrying, Cornel. I might have to give my investment tips. This could be very dangerous. No, Terry. Don't do that. Damien, it's great to have you on.
Thanks very much, Cornel. Good to be here again.
Absolutely. And to have your sponsor, the sponsorship of AccuVest. Again, there's a few critical aspects of AccuVest, but Damien, just in terms of the market conditions, what are you seeing at the moment in terms of inflation, in terms of movements of markets and so forth? Are we looking forward to a rosy run into Christmas?
Yeah, well, I suppose the last time we talked in the start of the summer in May, we'd had I suppose there'd been a bit of a rally. We were really talking about last year and how poor that had been prevention returns. I suppose thankfully this year has been an awful lot better. And then even since we spoke in May, June and July have been good. August, unfortunately, has been a bit more of a mixed bag. So a lot of volatility coming into the market in August. Really what we've had, I suppose, inflation continuing to come down, interest rates continuing to go up. Early on, the markets were certainly getting very encouraged by the fact that that inflation was coming down, and therefore, the expectation that interest rate hikes that had come through were working, and that we might be near the end of that interest rate hiking cycle. Unfortunately, the data that's come through recently, the continued strength of the labour market in the US, which is good, suggests that. But we've had a little bit of an uptick again in oil prices, and inflation. The pace of decline has decelerated quite a lot. So it's a good bit more nuanced, the data that we're getting through now, and there is concern that inflation might not get back down to the levels that are targeted. We had the Jackson Hole, the US central bank, the Fed chairman, came out and reaffirmed that they are targeting that 2% inflation target. They're not there yet, and they are continuing. They're holding fire and will do what's necessary. So tighten further if required. You also had Christine Lagarde come out this week talking about the ECB's focus on getting that target, getting inflation down to 2%, and so we're a good way off that. So despite the fact that economic growth has slowed a good bit, especially in Europe, where we've got Germany has really been in recession more or less for most of this year, you've got a good bit of concern about that, but the labour market is still good. Consumers are still spending to an extent. But so there is still the prospect now that rate hikes will more rate hikes and more tightening might be required, that inflation might have come down to this level, but it might prove stickier than expected. So really at the moment, the data is very mixed. We even had, I suppose, you had over the last week, you had Elon Musk come out and slash the prices of Teslas because he wants to promote people buying them again. They're not selling them at the level that they will. And yet you have then, so that's concerning. You've got some consumer goods, some luxury consumer goods are starting to see an easing off. You've got PMI data, which is companies and their purchasing managers have slowed down their degree of optimism. So they're concerned about the outlook for consumers. You've got consumer savings, certainly, that had been very high post-COVID, have come down a lot as people have continued to spend. So there is a lot of evidence out there that suggests that inflation is still sticky, that maybe we will continue to manage this soft landing, but there's countering data and countering evidence to suggest that maybe this is still just a lag effect, and we are going to get a correction and a correction in markets. And so from our perspective, what we're advising clients is to be cautious, stick to their strategy. If they have a lot of cash at the moment, while we were starting to move it into bonds, at the moment we are happy to hold cash. Because money market funds and things like that, you can earn 3.5%, nearly 3.75%, and it's uncertain as to whether or not cash rates, which are higher in the short term than long-term bonds, because everybody thought we were at the end of that cycle. It's not quite sure whether we are yet or not. So holding some cash is a good thing. If you are making lump sum pension contributions, having a strategy is the right thing to do, and sticking with that strategy. We wouldn't think that there's an advocate for big concern right yet, but we are a little bit cautious, and therefore we'd be phasing people into markets and gradually moving people into markets. And if there is a correction, then that's the time to really maybe bail in a bit more, hopefully we'll get a bit more clarity on the outlook for that as we go into Q3 and Q4, now that people are returning from summer holiday mode, I suppose.
Absolutely. So interesting times, a lot of mixed messages out there. But it would seem that cash is still king in all of this. One thing you just mentioned there in terms of pension schemes and people operating with pension schemes, it seems to me that certainly in our conversations over the past year or so, that we had an expectation that most small pension schemes would go into master trusts, and the small pension schemes would themselves close. That doesn't seem to have happened universally, as far as it's
and again, it's uncertain as to why that is, Conal, or what extent of that. You hear a lot of anecdotal evidence out there from talking to the providers. There still are a lot of pension schemes winding up and moving into master trust. There was a deadline whereby you had to be compliant by the end of last year, and the only out that you had on that deadline as a trustee was if you had made a commitment by the end of last year that you were going to wind up and move into to master trust. So I suppose what that means right now is people, in order to be compliant by the end of last year, they either didn't get there, and therefore they're kind of running the risk a little bit, in which case they really need to address it and come up with a plan as to whether they are moving into master trust or investing in getting compliant, which isn't really feasible for very small schemes. It might be feasible for medium-sized schemes, but you really need to come up with a plan. And I suppose where we're seeing focus really from the Pensions Authority is, while they originally started focusing on those master trusts and on those large schemes, now they are sort of moving more towards the one-man, single-man, those schemes. Some of those have derogations still until April 2026 if they were set up before the legislation came in 2021. But that's the single-man schemes. So they have derogations, but they still need to be thinking about, what are you doing? Are you going into a master trust? Are you going into a PRSA? What will you be doing over the medium term? And there is there's a lot still to do on that. I think some of the delay is probably administration companies and fund manager. The industry is a little bit swamped, I think, because there's been a lot of change over a short space of time.
Very interesting, Damien. That's as always, it's great to hear from you. Time is against us, so we better leave it there, I think. But very, very fascinating to hear your insights into the investment market, and also to hear that update on where pensions are at the moment.
interesting times, and people certainly shouldn't be sitting on their hands afraid of doing something. Having a plan is a good idea. Having cash is not a bad thing, but only if you're earning a return on it. Don't have it sitting in your bank account earning nothing. We've got 60 billion apparently of deposits with Irish banks. Yeah. Invested with the ECB at 3.75, and deposit holders getting almost nothing of that. So make sure that you're getting some return and that you have a plan and making steps in that direction.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Damien. Really appreciate it. Looking forward to talking. I think we're probably going to talk at more length next time. So
we are indeed, Colonel. Damien, thanks for that advice again. As I say to you, a very quick overview. I think we'll be back on for 15-20 minutes on our October 6th webinar. So really looking forward to that.
Great. Thanks, guys.
Okay, guys, moving on swiftly again. We promised a packed show. We're definitely delivering it so far. And I'm delighted to be joined this morning. I know, Sinead, you had a very quick hello at the very start. I'm delighted to be joined by our Institute President, Sinead Donovan. And I know, Sinead, as I mentioned, you've had even a busy couple of days, not mind 3 months and so on. But listen, to go back, I know everybody would be familiar with you, Grant Thornton, and I suppose your recent career. Maybe a lot of people know you through the Institute and so on as well. But if we take it back, maybe some people wouldn't be familiar with, maybe you started out and you actually trained in small practice, coming to Grant Thornton. Tell us a little bit about your story, maybe even why chartered accountancy.
Yeah, listen, thanks a million, Jeremy, and sorry for that. That you caught me by surprise early on there.
That was my fault. That was my fault.
But no, look, delighted to be here, and yeah. I entered the profession very early, so I was one of these rather unusual creature that knew she wanted to be a chartered accountant from day one. So I went into it straight from school, and at the time it was the commencement course, which was a straight from school route. Why chartered accountancy? Well, it's interesting. I've done kind of the open days over the last 2 weeks with the Institute. And I say to the grads as they're listening, it was 3 things. It was one was family influence. My father was a chartered accountant, and I saw the happiness and the challenge and the great career that he had. So that was the first thing. I think 2 was I was technology, the interest in technology. Now at that stage, technology was computers and how to do computers and bring computers into the business. And chartered accountancy was leading the way in that, and still is. And then I think the third was I just wanted to get going and meet people and engage with clients and all the rest. So I went into it straight from school. I joined a small firm, Ormsby and Rhodes, and I think as I scroll down through the attendees that there's a couple of my old partners on the in the attendee list, which is great. It was a definite decision to join a smaller firm. Guided primarily by my dad. His view was very much, look, a smaller firm would give you that all-rounded training. It would give you everything, and indeed it did. I remember sitting there I can picture the office in Lansdowne Road, and I remember sitting there and getting the bag of receipts from a farmer, and me being the South County Dublin girl did not know what AI receipts were. Now, there's a lot of people out there that will know what AI receipts are, and it's certainly not artificial intelligence, which we know AI is today. But it was from that, and it was all the way then up to, I was lucky enough that Ormsby and Rhodes had a very large audit at that time. So I got experience of a very large audit. And indeed, secondment or placement into that client. I was out with that client for about 4 months. So huge range. I thoroughly enjoyed my training. And I suppose the other thing that I would say the small firm training brought me, Jeremy, was direct interaction with senior stakeholders. So direct interaction with the partners and with the senior managers at the time, which meant that, as a raw 17-year-old, and by God was I raw, I learned very quickly. So that was the start. I'll be honest with you, I then did move on and I joined what was at the time a Big Six. So Arthur Andersen. So I kind of went from one extreme possibly to another. So I saw the good and the bad. What would I say? The good of a Big Six and a large firm at that time was the challenging work, was the hunger, was the competitiveness, was the range of clients. And then the bad was the exact same topics: the hunger, the competitive, the challenging, it was a tough environment, but I learned a lot, and I saw both the smaller end of the spectrum, the larger end of the spectrum. And then after a brief foray into industry for 5 years, I went back into Grant Thornton, which probably had a bit of both, a bit of the smaller, and then certainly in the last 20 years has grown into the larger firm that we are now.
Brilliant. You've given us a great overview there of I suppose, your history. There's a couple of things I actually wouldn't have known there, as I say to you, and because we all think of Grant Thornton, great firm now growing and more closer maybe to the big four than to the small practice. So as I say, you know from both sides, and that's brilliant as well, as I say to you. Tell me now, you've had I think your time as president started, your tenure, your 1 year started about mid-May. So you're about 3.5 months in. I know summertime as well, as I say to you, it's difficult, but really the autumn is a very busy time. I know we've touched upon some areas this morning, I think, to be very close to your heart. Is there some priorities that you over your year want to bring to the fore for the Institute, for practice, and just tell us a little bit about those?
Yeah, so I think my theme for the year, and when you come into the year, you are kind of encouraged to have a theme, which then the various initiatives can kind of slot in under. So my theme for the year is next gen, and if I break that down into 3 categories, it's the next gen members. So that's the current 2nd level and 3rd level cohort. And it's really, that is probably linked critically to the concept of attractiveness of the profession. I think possibly everybody on the call realizes that we are up against it from an attractiveness of the profession viewpoint. Numbers are falling, and probably more worryingly, numbers in the US, 300,000 left the profession in the last 2 years. So think of that, 300,000 left the profession. Never mind a smaller cohort coming into the profession. They left. Now I'm not getting, I don't want to send, fireworks out there or too worrying signals, but it is something we need to look at. And why is that? So for me, it's about getting out to, and for the Institute, and they've been fabulous doing this, getting out to the 2nd level, getting out to the 3rd levels. So we have a program of going out to the universities, talking to the finance grads, but also the non-relevant degrees as well, because I think that's really critical. And then also the 2nd level, there's a fabulous, and this would be a call to action to everybody on the call, on the webinar here. We do have a really good pack of material that you can download, which then you can use to go out and talk to secondary schools. So I know there'll be a lot of parents listening who maybe will get a call from their school. Can you talk about your profession, or is there anything that you can pass on, be it in TY or anything? And there's a pack there. So I would ask people to promote the profession. So that's the first next gen. The second next gen is probably our next gen, our next gen member, our current next gen members. So that's our students. And I suppose that's a cohort that I really want to ensure that they are spoken to, that they are kept informed as to the changes that are going on in the profession, because I know we'll touch on this later in the panel, but there's a lot of changes happening in the profession, and changes to them. So I want to make sure that we engage with them in the correct manner, be it the channels of communication that they're more comfortable with, which probably is not the channels of communication that my generation might be most comfortable with, but we have to interact in the best way to them. And also let them be aware of the opportunities that are there in the profession, which has got very, very wide, as all of us will know here. So, I mean, we've got the smaller and medium practices, which would still be somewhat generalist, but even there's huge specialisms there. And then we've got right up to the larger practices where there's really, very definite specialisms between cyber and forensics and compliance and all that. And then obviously we've got industry after that, but I'm very keen personally to push the practice. And then the third next gen are the next gen leaders. So interestingly, maybe not surprisingly, the 1 to 5 year post-qualifieds are the most disengaged body of members with the Institute. So that's something we need to look at, and I really am trying to look at now as to why is that? Are we communicating with them in the right manner? Do we have relevant topics for them? I mean, 1 to 3 year post QE. They've done their exams. They probably never want to sit another exam in their life. They're all about travel. They're all about experience. They're all about getting the next stage on their career. So we just need to make sure we're giving them the right support and in the right way, and keep them connected to what I call, and you'd see it a lot in my posting, the family of accountants. And I believe in that 100%, that we are a community that need to be there for each other and support each other. So that's my overarching themes. Sorry, I'm rambling now, Jeremy. So jump in whenever you want.
No. You've actually described the actual your team of the next generation and broken it down very succinctly. It's been really, really good, as I say to you. I know we have 1 or 2 questions coming in here now, but what I actually may do, and I know we're going to talk about practice, where it stands, challenges, opportunities. I may actually bring on our 2 other fellow practitioners here at this stage as well, and we'll have our panel. And don't be shy as well to you guys on the call. Type in your Q&A. I've seen a couple of observations points, different things, and we'll try to take those questions as well, because I think these having as many people and many insights is great too. So if we have Fiona and Sean there as well, hopefully we can get you on screen and get you talking there. Hopefully we can see you. I see Sean coming on there, and Fiona as well, as I say to you. Hopefully now we'll get Fiona. You know what I'm going to do, Sean? I'm going to start with yourself, and then I'll actually have, as Fiona gets herself set up there as well. Great. Listen, Sean, I mentioned at the outset, you're joining us from Strabane, just right on the border in County Tyrone. I know you originally would have set up a kind of more bookkeeping practice, and then formally a practice in recent years. Sole practitioner, a couple of staff on your own. And I suppose I'll try to end it nicely. So I'll start on, I suppose, what are you seeing as starting out as the challenges and things you're seeing in Northern Ireland? I know you've written on making tax digital and different things as well. And I'll ask Fiona her same thoughts as well then.
Yep, thanks for having me. I suppose the first thing, I have a throat infection, so I'll apologise in advance if my voice goes a wee bit. But I suppose the big headline factors, the cost of living crisis is obviously a big factor that we're seeing with clients, and it's a challenge not only for our clients but also for accountancy practices, where we're seeing rising overheads, increasing wages, and potentially even client insolvencies. We can see as well clients are maybe shelving CapEx plans or expansion plans and becoming a lot more cash flow focused. I suppose that, while being a challenge, is also an opportunity for us to get closer to our clients, so that we're providing not only accurate financial information and support, but also advice then on the broader areas of running their business. Maybe trying to add value through identifying maybe local grants, local techs running maybe part funded or fully funded training courses, and that can help then to boost the loyalty then from the client base and increase the firm's reputation. So as an opportunity, it might seem strange, it might even seem like running towards gunfire, but staying close to the clients at that point in time, it welds that relationship together.
I can see where you're coming from, Sean, because particularly when you're starting out in practice, to kind of get into clients and to build a relationship with them is very, very important. And you're right that insolvency, I suppose, potential increase is something we haven't seen. I'll talk from the Republic of Ireland as much. Maybe it was the supports and so on, maybe even the tax warehousing still left there. But I do think we're seeing a bit of it creeping up in the last few months, and that's definitely going to be an issue for a lot of businesses who've struggled over the last couple of years, and maybe the recovery post-COVID isn't what they expected. I can particularly think of hospitality and so on now with the bad summer we've had and different things and too. Listen, Fiona, I know you would be at a more established practice. I know your dad, James, would have set up James Byrne Company back in the 70s. You have 2-3 offices in Cork and Waterford. And I know we've spoken as well. You'd be very much involved in the Cork Society. What are you seeing from, I suppose, dealing with your clients, but even just the market and just the struggles of being in practice?
Thanks very much, Jeremy, for asking me on, and Sinead and Sean for your insights. I suppose it's quite similar to what Sean would say. I would start by saying it's a privilege to actually work with SME clients, that you're actively involved in their day-to-day. Would say you are probably their first call when there is a crisis, or we'll say what effectively to do. So you see people at their most vulnerable. And I equate SME practice to the equivalent of a GP practice, whereby you will say they come to you with their woes and their, and their problems, and will say, and you're their problem shooter, you're their person to see, I've seen this, you're not alone. These are the processes that you can go down through. These are the supports that are available. That really nasty letter that you got from the revenue, half the country has received it, and would say, and it's easily sorted. So we'll say, and that personal touch, or getting somebody out of a jam that might, now some things are complicated, but more things, 60 or 70% of the stuff that we see every day, would be stuff that you've seen before, and you would say you have a process, or somebody, somebody that can actually help them out, that they can help them out in it. So follow on from that, what kind of calls am I getting? What calls am I getting at the minute? The debt warehousing is definitely on people's minds, and would say lots of clients would have tried to pay it down, would say earlier. So the people who are left are really the people who are, who are probably actually struggling with it. And over the last 12 months, especially with the energy increases, and whereas the supports were actually a help, if you weren't able to get your prices up, and that has knock-on implications on inflation, and then knock-on implications then for staff looking for salaries effectively on it. There is going to be probably a challenge over the next, six to 9 months. Whether it'll impact on increased insolvencies, I don't know yet. It's more maybe the people maybe have to downscale, or we'll say, or merge in with other similar industries.
Yeah, we're definitely at a crucial point there. Sinead, you may have some thoughts there as well, as I say to you now, what you're seeing as a bigger practice for sure, but I'm sure you deal with a lot of SME clients too.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And look, listening to both Fiona and Sean there, I was absolutely struck with what you say, Fiona, that it's almost more, there's a lot of pastoral care that goes with looking after the SME clients, as well as the financial, and that's something that is critically important, to remember. Well, what are we seeing with clients? The big challenge, Jeremy, we're seeing with clients at the moment, whether it's small, medium, or large, is absolutely the cost, the cost of living, the inflation. There's going to be a difficult decision at the end of this year for a lot of payroll and a lot of pay rises, I fear. And I think we're at that juncture where businesses are not going to be able to keep up with the expectation and indeed the demand that is coming our way. And this comes back to the capacity within the profession. We are getting pushed by our employees that there is such a shortage of accountants, that they are looking for high salaries. And I think that's going to be the big thing for a lot of finance functions. And that's obviously going to then impact all all firms. So we're going to see that. The other big thing that I see, Jeremy, and I'd be keen to know what the other two feel, is the impact to the profession and indeed practice of AI. And this is the AI that I'm not the other AI, the artificial intelligence. To me, there's obviously huge opportunities, but there's also huge risks. There's huge risks that people I know in our firm, we have a risk that people are going to give the wrong advice because they just literally put into ChatGPT some inane ask and they get some. So to me, it's opportunity and it's a risk. I don't know if that's something that is sitting on Sean or Fiona's mind at this stage.
Well, listen,
it probably hasn't filtered. Yeah, it probably hasn't filtered as far as us so far now. I suppose it's not something that has flew up. I'm not sure, Fiona, if you're.
So we'll say what we've been, I suppose, doing for a number of years is been using technology such as the QuickBooks and Xero, and using all the feeds on the feeds in it. And we'll say what we have seen is, and it's kind of a bit of AI, but not the AI ChatGPT, is that that there's integration into letters, there's integration into to analytical reviews, that type of thing we are definitely looking at, would say, or getting, I don't know, would you call it AI or computer system to basically generate.
No, that's a very valid point. I think we've lost Fiona there, have we, a little bit?
Letters would say to go to the clients and the impact or guys to do, and a lot of the younger staff are actually brilliant at it, is to kind of say, well, you have all this knowledge and you have all this experience. How can we use that to get the deliverable better? And I've had one or two instances whereby they came up with something I would never have thought of, and you know what I mean, and it worked very well, and we implemented it across the firm, and effectively it saved time. So whether that is AI or whether it is using computers and bringing people effectively together and a supplement, and that is that we are using that, and we'll continue to do that going forward, because we have no choice but to do it. But would say trying to get the staff interested and coming in the door is a major challenge for us, and keeping, when they do come in the door with the training contract, and we have to offer all, we have to our CPA, chartered, ACCA, just to attract people effectively in. We're finding that, would say, not many. Well, some are not taking the course. So the minute they have the exams, regardless of the experience and stuff like that, they're gone traveling, they're gone to a bigger firm, they're gone into industry, and that comes all down to actually, to remuneration and effectively salary. So we'll say, to go back to Sinead, what you were talking about when you came on, about going into a small practice at the start. I trained before. I did the opposite. I trained before and came back. But it was to a family practice, and would say if the family connection wasn't there, I certainly wouldn't have, you'd have ended up in a multinational or national body or something. But would say the breadth of, you have to be quite broad. And I always say, you talk about your AI, I talk about, would say, I didn't know what a cash account was. It was kind of one of those people on the bus standing up kind of going, I don't know what a tracker mortgage is. I didn't know what a cash account was. And with significant experience, something, when I look back, so basic that I actually didn't know what it was. And you can find so much effective information on it. Like going back into small practice, would say, what I would say the strengths of it are, having been in it now like twice the amount of time that I was in Big Four, was that if you are an entrepreneurial spirit, or if you wanted to run your own business, or would say it doesn't have to be accountancy, it could be anything. Would say starting with an SME practice gives you the skill set that you will be able to, on your budgeting, on your doing your daily VAT, would say doing your accounts, and give you a very good financial knowledge going forward. So we'll say accountants should also be, they have the skill set to do the entrepreneurial side of it as well. And when we're interviewing and we're going out to the universities and we are up against all the Big Four and all that kind of people going out, what we stress is the entrepreneurial part. If you're an entrepreneur, you want to go into a family business going forward, with say your family business in, I don't know, like we'll say funeral director, or your father or mother has a supermarket and you're interested effectively in it. It'll give you the skill set and it'll give you the structure to be able to do that. And the other thing we stress as well is that as an SME practice, we have to embrace technology. We have to use it. Our staff numbers only marginally increased in the last maybe 7 or 8 years, but the level of turnover has increased significantly, and that is purely down to embracing the technologies. We're at the stage now whereby we're nearly maxed on the technologies, and we'll say we're nearly maxed on the technologies, and when we lose senior staff, we find they're harder and harder effectively to replace, because we'll say the junior staff coming up, don't see it as a long-term career path. So that's, there are a few of the challenges that I actually see. So for SME practice, I think it needs to be sold slightly differently to, to accountancy effectively in general. But we'll say, one of the key things is that you have access to the decision makers, and you can, even we've trained up people coming in from college and stuff like that. Like, I was in Cork yesterday, and would say one of my trainees is going back into college, and and I was sitting with her. And I have 21 years experience. I'm 21 years experience, and it was me that was sitting with her explaining how to do the WT return. So those things shouldn't definitely be undersold, in my view, anyway.
Thanks for those insights. Conal, I know you're sitting in the background there, and hopefully you've been getting some questions coming in there as well, or maybe you have some thoughts before we move on to a lot of challenges there. I know myself and Fiona have had good chats even with a number of practices and very informative last spring in Cork and so on, and technology for sure, and we trashed out some things. And I know, Conal, actually, we're going to have actually later in the autumn a technology talks, a kind of webinars where we have practitioners coming in sharing their real life experience as opposed to demos and practices. There was one question on there, when are you going to do something like that? So we are doing that in late November. And so it's one of our webinars. But Conal, what's coming in on the questions?
Well, just before I go to the questions, certainly, yes, I see a future for AI in accounting. I see a stopgap, if you like, of recruitment. It's difficult to get staff. It's going to continue to be. We will do everything we can to increase the inflow, but it is always going to be difficult. At the same time, we're being given this resource, which is artificial intelligence. So I think it's being used even now in the background in an awful lot of applications. You're using AI, you may not even be aware you're using it, but I see this going to be more and more. Obviously, people need to watch out. People need to be careful of it. It's not without risks. It's not without its drawbacks. But I certainly that's where I see some of the future. Now, that's just an observation. A question which has come in, and I think it is more of a comment than a question. As a very small practice, we are finding it difficult to keep up with all the new regulations, AML, Russian sanctions, daily revenue updates, increase in complexity. We've now stopped taking on very small income tax clients and have increased our minimum fee, as we can't make money out of these smaller clients. Our very small practice is viable going forward. I actually see perhaps part of the solution in that observation, and that the person has probably seen that sort of a small chartered practice is actually in a slightly more niche area than your general bookkeeper, perhaps. But I'll put it out to the panel to see what you would think of that.
I would still see it as a viable option. I suppose same as what you would be advising your clients. When you're setting up in business, you need to keep a really tight eye on your overheads. Make sure that you're following up on your accounts receivable. I suppose it's to me it's a fantastic opportunity to be able to set up on business and to be able to take that on. I know we've already touched on childcare and things like that before now, but again, achieving a work-life balance. There's lots of other things there too that help drive people moving into setting up a small practice. And it was one of the key drivers for me was achieving a work-life balance. So it certainly seemed that if you keep a tight eye on what's coming in, what's going out, and making sure that you're keeping generating new clients, it is a viable option, I think, anyway.
Absolutely. Fiona, what's
well, I really do hope that we'll say that we have a very strong SME practice going forward. You will say the breadth and diversity is significant. I think the country would be. I think the country and people in the country in general would suffer. You know what I mean? If effectively didn't have it. And some of the items that I get the most satisfaction out of is sorting somebody out with something. You know what I mean? Like, they're a pensioner and they're a pensioner and will say they get this letter in and they're so upset and they're so, you know what I mean? And all it takes is half an hour of my time. And we'll say, it's lovely to be able to spread your knowledge on it, and they're so thankful of it. You do have to be mindful of you do need to be mindful of the you know what I mean, of the costings and stuff like that. But everything can't be managed either in pennies and cents in it. And if we lose that sense of society, you know what I mean, we'll say, you know, I mean, we're all not multinationals, and we have to, we'll say something is giving back to the local community and the people effectively in the community. And, you know what I mean, and that's how we'll say I can best do that for people.
Absolutely. And SMEs, no doubt, are the lifeblood of this country, north and south.
Conal, can I just jump in there with an answer that's a little bit of my head and my heart? My heart is saying that the SMEs they have to be able to be viable, because they offer something that, and having been in both, they offer something that the larger firms don't and can't offer, whether they wanted to or not. They probably, some of them don't want to, but they can't offer it, because when someone comes to a smaller practitioner, they need that general advice. They need that, what I call pastoral care, which I'm not demeaning that, I'm inflating that. And the larger firms can't do that. They absolutely can't. I mean, they will throw it over their shoulder to someone else, and someone will be bounced around the firm. So it has. That's my head. That's my heart. That it has to. My head is saying that yes, I can't get my head around how, you know, smaller firms deal with the regulation, because it's coming at us in waves. So what we need to do as a member body is keep doing what we're doing, which is being the voice to ensure that it's appropriate regulation, that it is, you know, at the appropriate level for whatever advice is being given, and that, you know, we as a member body are the voice for that, and I think we do that, but we will lose that at our peril if we stop doing that. So you know, I want to keep hearing, and it's down to the practitioners here to keep telling us where the pain points are, so that, you know, Conal, Jeremy, all you guys can feed into Stephen and Crona and their team in advocacy, and they can keep doing the lobbying that we do.
Could I jump in there, Sinead? Just 1 minute. We'll say Germany was, you know, I would be blue in the face from me having gone about the CRO and all the letters I sent to local politicians and everything. And would say, you know, the movement, and I know it's been slow, but the movement that you have made with the CRO and with the audit exemption has been fantastic. And I know it's years, and I mean years, ineffectively in the making. And that is probably, it's just to get it pushed on, you know what I mean, quicker. And would say the same with the revenue, with all the powers with the revenue having, and the level of increase. Like someone told me yesterday that would say they can get your phone records, they can contact the bank for your transaction records. So like SME practitioners would say sometimes we're used as the Trojan horse to put through, would say, you know, bullied, for want of a better word, would say, by some of the senior people in revenue. I mean senior as in like they'd be at AP level, and would say especially with more Big Four going into the revenue and things like that. I think now we would always fight them, but we wouldn't be afraid of them at all. But would say, you know, you sometimes can feel that your clients might not have the same resources as a big company, you know what I mean, could be seen as, would say, a mark to make a point through the TAC or something like that. And that's where the Institute need to come in to actually store up the members, so that the local public aren't being used, do you know what I mean, would say, inadvertently, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, a point very well made. Yes, absolutely. I was, as always, encouraging members to come to us, both for support. Reach out, by all means, reach out to us. We're happy to help. Jeremy and myself take calls every day from members, just about practical issues, but also for change. I hope we will have some change around the audit exemption, which will be a practical help. I hope that's coming. We're certainly working in the background quite hard on that one, and we've also engaged a lot with CRO, and we've continuous engagements, and I presume we all will continue to have them with revenue on a number of different fronts. So it is ongoing. By all means, let us know what it is that you need, and we will do our level best.
And just to jump on there as well, Conal, sorry, obviously as Jeremy already alluded to, the Making Tax Digital piece is coming down the line for the North and across the UK. So it's obviously a huge challenge for small practice, and it is something that I know Chartered Accountants Ireland Institute are doing brilliant work on that as well. and just trying to get small practice as ready for what will be a huge challenge as possible. So obviously that's a big factor as well.
Indeed, Sean. And yeah, you're right. Leontia is going to cover, it's been a busy summer of consultations. She has a recording coming up now in a few minutes, as I say to you as well. And that'll be a key part of it, as well as, of course, the implementation on the ground of the Windsor framework and the customs and so on too. So yeah, a lot on the UK side. And you're right on we tend to talk about revenue, Republic of Ireland, but yes, on the UK, making tax digital and where it stands at the moment, which isn't a great position, let's be honest with you. And how it's going to go forward. We're going to have a more detailed talk on that in a webinar in either October or December, depending on where it lands, Sean. So really looking forward to that one. Listen, guys, time is never on our side, but I'd like to maybe now, I suppose we've looked at the issues, and there's a lot of key issues there. Both Fiona and Sean put forward that we as an institute do a lot, but could do more and so on. Is there one thing where, and I'll start with you, Sinead, you'd identify perhaps as an opportunity? It could be a service area. It could be something to think about and say, look, there's an opportunity there for work or for different things that maybe people aren't exploiting as much as possible. It could be technology. It could be different things that some practices mightn't be exploiting. And I know there's no magic bullet there, but some just incremental points to think about.
Oh, Jeremy, that's a bit of a tough question to
It is. And if somebody else has something to mind, or we might save you on that one as well. So if you can't think of it, not to worry, Sinead.
No. I mean, I look, to me, it all does come, unfortunately or fortunately, around tech. And I think we do need to, and possibly it's something that in the Institute we need to have a bit of maybe a focused support for. But it's around the developments in tech and the developments in AI. As I say, it's in two buckets: it's opportunities and it's risk. And so we need to manage that within the two buckets, or else it's going to overtake us. I'm not saying that accountants will ever be redundant. We won't, but we need to absolutely just hone our skills as to where we can best give them. So sorry, that's a bit of a boil the ocean answer. Apologies.
No, it's a very good answer. And as I mentioned, we are doing and rolling out from this November technology webinars, and really real life practitioners talking to myself and Cohen about what they use, what they find good, what they don't. Product demos are great too, but you're just getting one side and a bit of a sales pitch. So I think that real life experience will work well. You'll be seeing more of that in emails from us when they're coming up and so on. And of course, we'll have technology conference and free events into January and so on as well. But it's something we're keen to do more of as well. Listen, Sean, I'm putting you in the hot seat next. Any opportunities you can think of? And I know you mentioned insolvency there in a roundabout way as an opportunity. I suppose it kind of is if you're the insolvency practitioner, but is there anything else you can think of?
I suppose even on the technology piece as well, Worth and the North here making tax digital coming down the line, it's probably an opportunity now before that's forced upon us to actually take a wee look at the technology we have. Is there a technology gap there? Is there stuff that we are using, whether it's remote access or servers? Is there something there that we could actually do better? So this could be the ideal time now, rather than having it forced upon us and a bit of a firefight just before it actually happens, to actually sit down and look at it now and say, right, we've identified a gap, let's cover that as well as part of this. So as we've sort of touched on throughout this, there's a number of challenges, but some of them fall into that grey area where they're both a challenge and an opportunity. So that's probably overkill on the technology side, but
No. And I'm really leaving you, Fiona, in a sticky wicket now. Technology, I'm sure, is something, and I know we've had discussions on this, but is there anything that you can see that's, I suppose, a potential upside or something that for people to think of and explore a little bit more?
I suppose I would say there's a shortage of accountants everywhere. Means SME businesses are finding it very difficult to actually attract and resource accountants. So we'll say there is probably an opportunity for kind of small to medium practices to bring systems into their things and use the information, the stuff that we've been using for maybe the last 5, 6, 7 years. To them, like we'll say, and do Xero or quick
proposal or one of those things,
and do management accounts for them. There is less risk in it. You know what I mean? It ties them in as a client. You have access to their information, and we'll say the challenges with it, we have found with it is getting the information across in, we'll say, you know, taking the photo sounds fantastic, you know what I mean, no problem, but half of them don't come across properly because the four things aren't in it, you know what I mean, on the scanning side of it. So there is a bit there in it, and all the feeds are back up again, which is, you know what I mean, which does help as well. And that actually adds value to a client in a real-time basis. And whereas I do think that when you do a good service, people do appreciate it. But sometimes the statutory stuff and the year-end stuff in the CT, it's always, oh God, that's last year, and you know, I mean, what relevance is it to me now? But when they're getting real-time information every 2 months or every quarter, would say they actually find that information feeds into their day-to-day better. And I find that people are better willing to pay for that rather than, would say, you know, the statutory stuff, which is deemed a compliance and a pain.
Okay. I'm as I say, we could talk probably for the rest for another hour on this, and I know we will have other webinars and different things as well. First of all, I'd like to thank Sinead and Sean and Fiona for joining us, and of course you too, Conal, as I say to you. I know we've had a couple of people there asking can they get Sinead's email address and contact her. I think your email for President's duties is president@charteredaccountants.ie. Am I wrong on that? I actually have to check that one now, as I say to you.
No,
but I think
right.
Yeah, president@charteredaccountants.ie gets to Sinead if you've something you'd like to raise and an issue. I know that people are talking about making tax digital and so on. I know we're going to have a little bit of that from Leontia now. We're going to have a more detailed talk about it. And I know as well, with a couple of people there, Susan was one lady who was raising just the burden of regulation, particularly around audit for the very small practice and sole practitioner. Sometimes very little leeway with other different things, but we will actually have Aidan Lamb on the next webinar on 6th of October. And that's one thing we'll talk to him about as well, to see is there what initiatives or what thoughts he'd have on that as well as the Director of Professional Standards. So if we didn't get to your question, and there's some very good valid points there, we may get comment on them again towards the end of Leontia's recording here. And hopefully, I know we're gone a little bit over time on this, but hopefully, guys, you can stay on for the next 15, 20 minutes. I know if you can't, not to worry if there's any other thoughts or questions there. But we'll move on to the actual UK tax piece. And I know we'll have Gerard back in it as well there. Does that sound good?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Brilliant. Well, listen, thanks for that. I'm going to go to our technical guru, the man always in the background, Chris. I'm going to challenge you now, like good old Gay Byrne, and roll it there, Colette. I think we have actually got Leontia on a recording, or have we not? Conal, just before, while Chris is lining up that piece, actually I'll talk about the student recruitment campaign. And the student recruitment campaign, I'm sure you've seen it, albeit social media. You've seen our colleague Sinead Fox-Hamilton and her team. It was mentioned there. Sinead Donovan was on some of the actual online webinars for recruiting new students. The deadline for sign up for that is actually going to be the 11th of September. So if you're actually in practice and you're trying to sign in students at the moment, that deadline is on the way. And also there's an incentive scheme where if you take on more trainee chartered accountant students than you had last year, so if you had one last year and you take on two, the first year's fees, you can get a discount for that second person of €1,000 or £900 sterling for the first year. So that's something not to be sneezed at as well, and to bear that in mind. So basically, that's there's the links and the information there in the recruitment campaign, which will be going on for another week or so. So it's a very important time of the year for recruitment as we ramp up for Cap 1s, Cap 2s, and FEs again, but particularly for the Cap 1s and Cap 2s. Good. Hey, listen, Chris is telling me we are good to go on the recording for Leontia. So listen, guys, we're going to go with Leontia's UK tax recording. I know whoever you're based on the island, it's very, very popular because most of us want to have a knowledge of UK tax, even with their clients in the Republic of Ireland. So listen, roll it there, Chris.
Hi there and welcome to the September 2023 UK tax update for Practice News. It's been a very busy few months, even over the summer, since my last full update for Practice News. And of course, if you have a special interest in tax, you know that there are lots of moving pieces and changes happening. So hopefully most of you know me by now, but for those that don't, I'm Leontia Doran, the UK's tax specialist for the Institute. I'm also the Tax NI subject lead for student education and will be a very familiar face and voice mostly to many students that are studying at all levels of the Institute's education programme. So I guess we're at the 1st of September. My fingers are certainly crossed for the FAE students that are awaiting their results next Friday, the 8th of September. So in this short recording, I'll be providing you with a brief update on what's been happening since our last update and what we as an institute continue to work on for you, our members. So you can see that this time around the key themes are similar to previous themes that we've covered, but we're going to be looking at lobbying work, HMRC services, EU exit, and a few miscellaneous things that are happening, just picking and choosing some specific areas of interest. So starting firstly on the lobbying work. Since the last full UK tax update for Practice News, we've actually responded to 4 specific consultations, expanding the cash basis, simplifying and modernising HMRC's income tax services, the tax administrative framework, that one focused on information and data collection, and finally a very interesting one on creating innovative change through legislative pilots. Now, as normal, several key recommendations were made as part of each of our submissions to those consultations. And I'm not going to go into detail of the consultations, but they're based on your feedback, and you can read about them in more detail in the tax representation section of our website, and I'll provide you with a link to that later on. Now, full consultation responses from the government are still expected to these particular consultations, but in the interim, we've had a number of successes whereby a number of previous lobbying recommendations made by the Institute and specifically the NI Tax Committee are actually being implemented, including changes to the process for claiming marriage allowance, how the high income child benefit charge is collected, and the need for HM Treasury and HMRC to report annually on tax simplification in the wake of the closure of the Office of Tax Simplification. In addition to the 4 consultation submissions I've mentioned, we also made an evidence submission to the House of Lords Protocol Subcommittee's inquiry into the Windsor Framework in May, and you can read that in detail on our website. Now, the House of Lords Committee did publish its final report over the summer in July, and they specifically referenced our recommendation that an education campaign and more detailed guidance is needed on the trade operating model in the Windsor Framework, and in particular, that education campaign should include GB traders in order to ensure that goods movements into Northern Ireland under the new trade operating model are not disrupted once that begins from the end of this month, from the end of September. Also over the summer, earlier this week, at the end of August, the Institute also wrote to the Financial Secretary to the Treasury to express a number of concerns we have arising from the draft legislation, which will restrict the geographical scope of agricultural property relief and woodlands relief for inheritance tax purposes to UK land and property only from the 6th of April 2024. Now, broadly, we express concern in respect of the particular impact that this will have on Northern Ireland taxpayers, given NI's close proximity to Ireland, and of course the retrospective nature of this legislative change on gifts into trust in the previous 7 years. So whilst the legislation takes effect from the 6th of April 2024, it has potential retrospective impact. And finally, in terms of lobbying work, next up is a consultation we'd be keen to hear your feedback on. So HMRC and HM Treasury are jointly consulting at the moment on tax incentives for occupational health. Now, this consultation is open until the 12th of October, and it's specifically seeking views on how expanding the existing benefit in kind exemption for medical benefits could help employers provide more medical services to employees, essentially helping some of the long-term sick back into work and helping with that resource gap that we know is so troublesome for businesses across the UK and Ireland. We'd also like to hear your views in this consultation, so please get in touch with me by Friday the 29th of September, and you'll see my email at the end of this recording. Turning now to HMRC services, so here I want to cover several specific issues, including once again how HMRC services currently are and the impact that the current restrictions on the self-assessment helpline are currently having. We'll also be keen to hear from you on what you think of HMRC's agent dedicated line, and I'm going to give you an update on HMRC's post project on posts more than 12 months old. So firstly, we'd love to hear your feedback on current HMRC service levels, because once again, we're due to meet with HMRC to discuss this at the next representative body steering group. So that's the highest level forum the HMRC holds at which we are represented. That next meeting is in early October. So of course, in order to do that, please get in touch with me and let me know your up-to-date feedback on your recent experiences. Now, more recently, of course, many of you will already be aware that the self-assessment helpline remains closed to queries from taxpayers from the 12th of June. It's expected to reopen next week on the 4th of September. HMRC did so to push more taxpayers to use digital services, but we are aware that a digital service is not available for everything a taxpayer or an agent might want to do, and also that this is having a particular impact on the digitally excluded. So essentially it's compressing queries into a shorter time period and could lead to even more issues down the line the closer we get to the 2022-3 self-assessment deadline. Now, this particular restriction comes after HMRC has already restricted queries being taken on the agent dedicated line on 2 occasions already in 2023. And as I previously mentioned, is clearly against a backdrop of ongoing significant budgetary pressures being faced by HMRC, which they're trying to deal with by directing and targeting the resources and by pushing taxpayers and agents to deal with them digitally, where a service, of course, is available digitally to do so, and where that service works efficiently and effectively. That's not always the case, as many of you already know. The decision to restrict access to HMRC's helplines is another concerning decision, and as previously mentioned, it does raise the question of how HMRC services will be run in future, in particular the agent dedicated line. I have predicted this before. That actually has come to fruition in that HMRC are now conducting a review of the agent dedicated line. But unfortunately, we can't provide more information at this time. We will share more on this with you and on any specific proposals, draft proposals that are made when we're actually able to do so. So overall, we are discussing all of this with HMRC, but I cannot stress enough the importance of providing your help and feedback to ensure your views and concerns are put forward at the highest possible level. So I would again urge you to get in touch with your comments and observations. And finally, in the area of old posts, which I touched on earlier, since the 10th of July, there has been a HMRC task force working on a project that's designed to clear posts of more than 12 months old. Essentially, agents are able to use the agent account manager team to escalate cases more than 12 months old using a specific online form. Now, if you're not aware of this, more information is available on this in the Chartered Accountants Tax newsletter from 17th of July. Since that project commenced in July, HMRC has reviewed progress and is continuing with this work with no end date specified at present. So if you are an agent that has post more than 12 months old, we would encourage you to engage with this process, because although HMRC is seeking to identify such posts in its postal queues, it may miss cases that are more than 12 months old. We understand also that once sufficient progress has been made on posts more than 12 months old, HMRC will then be seeking to address posts in the 10 to 12 month old category. So turning now to EU exit, quite a lot happening over the last few months. Firstly, in my previous update, I mentioned that the replacement legislation for the VAT second-hand margin scheme commenced from the 1st of May 2023. Remember, it only applies to second-hand motor vehicles and is known as the Second-Hand Motor Vehicle Payment Scheme. Now, this scheme allows, where certain conditions are met, businesses, including those in the EU, to claim a VAT-related payment if they buy a second-hand vehicle in GB, which of course is England, Scotland and Wales, and they move this to Northern Ireland with the intention to either resell it in NI or to the EU. So claims are possible by EU traders. As the scheme has been in operation now for several months, we'd be happy to hear from you in respect of any concerns or queries you have in relation to the operation of this new legislation, because we have direct contact with HMRC's VAT policy team on this, and we have had previously meetings with them to discuss this legislation. There's also been a number of other developments in respect of the Windsor Framework, not surprisingly, since it was announced in February time, with the first tranche of the changes taking effect from the end of this month. So firstly, the long-awaited reimbursement scheme finally launched on the 30th of June, which the Institute had been lobbying for since 2021. So the scheme essentially means that traders can reclaim duty on goods moving into NI which do not or did not subsequently move into the EU. Claims are therefore possible back to the 1st of January 2021. Now, HMRC recently responded to the Institute to say that interest will not be paid on refunds received by traders. We are considering challenging this, given the cash flow impact for many traders who have been awaiting the scheme for over 2 years. Broadly, the scheme allows for reimbursement on where tariffs have been paid on goods classed as being at risk when they come into Northern Ireland, which later became not at risk under the original protocol, and also it will be possible on goods movements in the red lane, which should have been green lane movements under the Windsor Framework's new trade operating model. We also continue to press as an institute for a longer term solution to the need for more customs intermediaries to support goods movements into Northern Ireland, and that's of course in the context of the expected end of the Trader Support Service from 31 December 2023. So we already successfully lobbied for a year's extension for the TSS, but there needs to be a longer term solution. Note also that the UK government's new border operating model for imports into the UK from countries within the EU, including Ireland, was due to commence from the 31st of October 2023. However, earlier this week, it was announced that this is being delayed. There had been some speculation over the last few weeks about that, and it will not now commence until January 2024. More information on this announcement will feature in Chartered Accountants Tax News on the 4th of September. And finally, the new trade operating model in the Windsor Framework, i.e. the red and green lanes that you've probably heard so much about, is still expected to commence from the end of this month on the 30th of September, with new, more detailed guidance published over the summer and available on gov.uk for traders. The importance of more detailed and timely guidance was a key recommendation of the Institute in its submission to the House of Lords inquiry earlier this year. Now, this new trade operating model is underpinned by traders being an authorised trader under the new UK Internal Market Scheme, which also commences from the 30th of September. During the summer, HMRC undertook an exercise to write to traders authorised under the current scheme to advise them to sign up to the new UK Internal Market Scheme by the 31st of July so that their application could be approved in time for moving goods in the green lane under the Windsor Framework. HMRC has advised that if you applied after 31 July 2023, your application may not be processed in time. And just finally, because we have so much change coming down the tracks, members will continue to be updated on developments via Chartered Accountants Tax News, which issues every Monday. As usual, if you have any feedback on EU exit issues, please do get in touch, and remember you get my email address at the end of the recording. So moving on now to 3 areas under miscellaneous. Firstly, basis period reform and a new form for overlap relief. So at present, we are now in the transitional tax year 2023-2024 of the move to the tax year basis under basis period reform. At the start of the summer, HMRC announced that it will be launching an online form for overlap relief requests as part of the move to basis period reform. Now, the Institute, in its response to the first basis period reform consultation 2 years ago in summer of 2021, recommended that HMRC provide this information to taxpayers where it had this information in the systems. So we're really pleased to see that that has come to fruition. Essentially, the importance of this is in relation to any unincorporated businesses with a non-31 March or 5 April accounting period end, because they are able, in this transitional year 2023-2024 of basis period reform, to use any unused overlap relief carried forward. Now, this is particularly important because any profits not already assessed to tax must be included in their assessment for 2023-2024, but essentially can be reduced by unused overlap relief carried forward. Overall, HMRC will only be able to provide this information if it has been recorded in HMRC systems and included within submitted self-assessment returns for previous years. If the details have not been recorded, what HMRC is seeking to do is to provide data to allow the taxpayer, or of course their agent, to recalculate any unused overlap relief from the data that HMRC does hold in its systems. Now, you can request information on overlap relief prior to the launch of the form, but many agents prefer to wait until the form is actually launched. The form was expected to be available in August. However, it was announced earlier this week that the online process for seeking overlap relief details via the online form will be launched from the 11th of September. Turning now to R&D, so coupled with changes to the rates of R&D tax relief, which many of you will be aware of, that took effect on the 1st of April, more recently there have also been a number of other developments in the area. So firstly, for accounting periods beginning on or after 1 April 2023, companies must submit a claim notification form to notify HMRC in advance that it intends to make an R&D claim. More recently, from the 8th of August 2023, companies now must also submit an additional information form to support their R&D claim, and this must be submitted before submitting the company's corporation tax return. If this isn't done, HMRC will write to the company to say that it has removed the R&D tax relief claim from the company's tax return. Now, the form can be submitted by an agent or a representative of the company, but it must provide certain details, including those of the main senior internal R&D contact in the company who is responsible for the claim, in addition to details of any agent involved in making the claim. Overall, both of these new forms arise from ongoing concerns about fraud and error in R&D claims, more information on which was announced in July 2023 when HMRC published its annual report. At that time, HMRC published new estimates for the level of non-compliance in R&D and also published what's called HMRC's approach to R&D tax reliefs, which sets out HMRC's compliance approach in this area in more detail. Now, this latest analysis of fraud and error estimates that the overall level of fraud and error for both reliefs under the SME scheme and under the large company R&D expenditure credit scheme for 2020-2021 was just over 1.1 billion, or 16.7% of claims, which is significantly higher than the previous published estimate of just under 4%. According to HMRC, the majority of this non-compliance is in the SME scheme, where error and fraud is said to be in the region of 24.4%. So probably not a surprise to see that HMRC are taking this approach to R&D tax reliefs. Now, the next R&D workshop with HMRC is next week on the 5th of September, and it will include a prolonged session on the new approach to R&D tax reliefs and the new approach to compliance. We, the Institute, are represented on this and would welcome your feedback on this particular publication and approach, because we're concerned that the approach being taken is deterring genuine R&D tax relief claimants. And finally, turning now to making tax digital. Of course, it would be remiss of me not to mention MTD, despite very little having happened since the last update. HMRC's Small Business Review, which this institute participated in back in March and April, is still ongoing, with the outcome expected to be announced sometime in the autumn. By way of reminder, the institute pressed HMRC's MTD policy team as part of this review to make the exemption threshold for MTD more realistic and set it at 85,000, the level of the VAT registration threshold. We also expressed concern that agents will not be able to bulk sign up clients, that the trial will only be public from April 2025, and that there is a need for free bridging software to be available. We also highlighted the dire need to simplify HMRC in terms of income tax legislation. They are considering many of these aspects, and we await an announcement in due course, possibly at autumn statement, the date for which we expect to be announced sometime this month. This is usually around about mid-November. So that's everything on the key themes. And finally, just a reminder that I've just given you an overview only of what's been happening on key work streams. Remember, there's some useful links here on the slide. You can keep up to date with all the latest Irish, UK and international tax developments via Chartered Accountants Tax Newsletter, which issues every Monday, and there is a link to subscribe on this slide if you haven't already done so. as promised, I've also given you some contact details. So the final thing I want to sign off with is a thank you for listening, and I would encourage you to get in touch. Thank you.
And I'd like to thank Leontia for actually making that recording earlier this week. Very comprehensive as ever, and even with the summer. And I know Garrod has been the same in the Republic of Ireland, as we mentioned earlier. There's always a lot of consultations and ongoing changes. Garrod, I see you there still, and I know you've been busy as ever with questions and different things. And I did now say to you, you might be back at around 12 o'clock. Was there any comments or general things you were seeing there coming through that you'd like to address as well now to the audience that's left?
There was a good comment came in on the research and development tax credit and the specified return for 2022. So there is a concern, as just a further question, as to whether there could be a delay, given that there has been, I suppose, anecdotally anyway, delays with processing the refunds. So we will keep an eye on this in the coming weeks. We have a talc technical meeting next week and a talc collection, so we're too late to get it on the agenda, but we can get it in under AOB, given it's a straightforward query. So I will follow up with that. I suppose just look, conscious of time, the one thing I'd like to say to people is, in context of the enhanced reporting requirement, I suppose we'd really welcome your any feedback here. Something very simple, even an email to say, look, you're completely unaware of this. I appreciate that's not where we should be at this time, given the implementation date. But again, we are going to hopefully engage with revenue a lot on this, at least in the coming weeks. So I suppose just really to reiterate that. So I suppose just those two things I think is enough for now. I think we've got back through the Q&A there, I suppose, on the other bits and pieces. And yeah, look, I'd say just to note, look, we are limited in the type of feedback we can give in terms of giving you the answer, but look, revenue guidance is always improving, and I think we all find that the tax and duty manuals contain a lot of information, and we are starting to see more examples, particularly in the context of the defective concrete products levy. If there are particular examples that you find aren't really getting you where you need to, you can raise it with us, and we can raise it with revenue. So, I suppose that's really where we can be of most value to you when you come in with the specific queries, and as I say, we can raise them. But yeah, as always, I suppose that's the three things there. Probably enough information for one day.
Indeed. And Garrod, thank you for that. I know there's always questions in the background. You're great to be typing away and having a go at that. We'll have you back again, of course, in October. I'm sure there'll be more stuff coming out from talc and different things. Listen, as we get ready to wrap up, we're going to a little bit over, but not too bad, as I say to you. I know we'll just bring actually Conal and Sean and Fiona there as well, if you're still there. As I say, I know, Sean, you had something you wanted to mention there about a network. So we'll give you an opportunity, and hopefully if Fiona and even Stephen is there as well, if anybody has last comments or wants to say bye-bye or whatever else. Sean, the floor is yours anyway. You wanted to mention something.
Yeah, absolutely. I suppose as a small business, having a professional network, having people, other accountants that you have established links with for support, especially around the regulations and all that, is definitely a big factor. I know it's something that I took time to build because Strabane wouldn't be my hometown. So I built networks with accountants in the area around here, and obviously got support then from colleagues that I trained with Kevin Kelly. So I suppose that professional network, I suppose it's the old adage, two heads are better than one, definitely comes in handy when you're dealing with the weight of regulation. And even though these people would technically be your competitors, you always find that everybody offers a will in a year, and that's very helpful. And I would obviously like to think that for those people in the network, that I'm also a sounding board, that they can approach me and ask questions and get information as well. So I suppose I just wanted to sort of pop that up as a sort of key ingredient whenever you are operating on a smaller scale.
It's very, very important. And I know Fiona, I think she mightn't be there now, as I say to you, but I know Fiona, as I say to you, would be very much involved in the Cork Society, very active group. And I know I met with a number of practitioners back in March time down in Cork from the SMP community. And also it's great to have that as a sounding board. You're right, you're not in direct competition with these people, and there's issues, and just even to get just an ideas of what you're doing. Technology is one area, different things as well, for sure, as I say to you. Thanks for that, Sean, and thanks for taking the time to join with us on this one. I know you'll be back with us as well. I think before Christmas we'll have to figure out when exactly, as I say to you, when Making Tax Digital will land best, and when we'll have more information on it.
Lovely.
Any thoughts there that you're seeing now? I see we have Fiona, you probably heard me there in the background talking about the good work the Cork Society does and so on, which fits in nicely with what Sean was saying about having a network is so important.
Oh no, it's fantastic, and I heard you say, right, we're not in competition with another, which we're not. We have to go meet for another cup of coffee and stuff like that, and see, can we come up with any solutions? You know what I mean, to make all our lives easier.
There's no magic bullet, but sometimes it can give you little tidbits and ideas. And I know even that day I was down in Cork, people were talking about chatbots for answering queries, and a new piece of technology. And we all be talking about these things and sharing our thoughts. So it's definitely good to be involved in, as I say to you. Mm-hmm. So that's it. Was there anything else there, Fiona, that came from listening in there, as I say to you, or any other thoughts that came to mind? If I was to say to you one line to summarize your thoughts on the morning.
I suppose SME practice is a challenge, but it's very rewarding, and would say, and it just needs to be promoted, and it needs to be and it is resourced and stuff like that, and it's just to give us the skill set, would say, or to help us with the skill set to actually to deliver effectively to deliver. And whereas regulation is increasing, I would just, anybody that's listening, reach out to your fellow colleagues. They're not competition. You all have the same problems, and you might come up with a solution that might actually help effectively everybody. And if it's good, get onto the institute and roll it out nationwide. I think we need to be a bit more collaborative and rather than working in silos.
No, indeed, that's one thing we are looking at, as well as try to get people more involved with everything. Conal, any thoughts or any further questions you're seeing coming in there?
A question there. There's been a couple of questions for Dee, which we'll pass on to her.
Yeah.
This one is that there's a recording issue when filing the annual return for a company with numerous directors. The CRO may reject this and say one or more of the directors' name or PPS is not correct. Can the CRO not be more specific if rejecting a submission and outline which particular director or PPSN does not match? Very reasonable request. It's certainly something that we have lobbied on, that specific point. Given that the system is in place at the moment, I'm not sure whether they're going to change it on time. What I'd recommend anyone do is to get documentation, if you can at all, from the Department of Social Welfare for each of your client directors. So as you can see what their PPS number is on that and what their name is on that. Just get a copy of that, email it to you, whatever, but get that ahead of time. It's too time consuming to submit a return for a company with numerous directors like that, and then be left wondering afterwards, well, which one of them was it? So it's something that I think practitioners should be doing now.
Could I just add in there, a little hack that we've kind of come up with on it, is that you can use the RBO as well. So if it is like a company limited by guarantee or something that will say there's no beneficial RBO person on it, put all the directors on it and what's on the accounts. We'll say once they're on the RBO, it'll be accepted.
Yeah, that's a very good hack. Absolutely. But look, I think that the thing is to plan. This is a bigger burden this year than before. There is a potential that you could have a couple of weeks added on to the whole process by this. Absolutely, that's a great idea, Fiona. But I would be strongly encouraging people to plan and to get a piece of documentation from social welfare so that you can actually see it. Don't be relying on people assuring you that their name is Tommy or Tomas or Tom in social welfare when it isn't. Okay, that's that. There are a few more comments there. As I say, some comments or questions. People are making comment on the difficulty of sole practice. Yes, I get that. I understand that. Look, I think it's a game of inches. There is no magic bullet. Where I say a game of inches, I mean you try and improve it here, improve it there, improve it somewhere else. To in the main, just try and move it forward and create some progress. I think there will always be a place for sole practitioners. Someday I'm going to troll through the archives of Accountancy Ireland back to the 1970s, where someone is saying that the day of the sole practitioner is over. It hasn't happened. I don't think it's going to happen anytime soon. Or the smaller practice. I think there's room for everybody. So look, thank you very, very much to our contributors. I don't know. Have we come to the end, Jeremy?
We have, yes, to thank Sean, to thank Fiona, Gerard, Leoncha for her recording, also to thank Dee, and I think we still have Stephen there as well. Sinead asked to pass on my apologies. She's had to skip off, as I say to you, but she welcomes any feedback from anybody. We mentioned that email address, president@charteredaccountants.ie. She is everybody's president, your president too. So any feedback or anything, and I know she's got a very active autumn and winter planned of getting around the whole island as well. So I'm sure you have an opportunity to meet with her in person. And no, that's pretty much it. I know we've some slides there as well where we've upcoming webinars and different things as well, including the next practice news. So if you have the slide deck, the next practice news is on the 6th of October. We will have a talk again, more about childcare. We will also have a talk with professional standards with Aidan Lamb. So some of those issues we had today about regulation, is there any leeway on that? For sure. And then we have some other courses coming up on the more technical side, like financial reporting, charities in Northern Ireland, going into practice day as well on to stay 4 weeks on the 29th. One that everyone has to do at the outset. And there's a link there at the bottom as well to our practice news webinar page, where we've a lot of different webinars coming up as well, including that technology one where I mentioned towards the end of November, real life experience with practitioners. So don't forget about that one as well, and it'll be past the ROI tax deadline time. So listen, I thank everyone, for their contributions, and as I say, that's pretty much it. I don't think we have any more questions coming in, Conal. And I suppose the final thing I can say is to thank everyone for sticking with us this long who is still here. We've well over 200 participants still here with us at 25 to 12, and hopefully you found the show and the webinar, the recording will come out to you again early next week, and it'll be on YouTube as well, that you found it useful.
Thank you very much, everybody.